Money is one of the most emotionally charged relationships that we'll ever have. It becomes a mirror, the one that reflects back your beliefs about safety, worthiness, possibility, and power.
During the 2008 recession, we pretty much just lost everything. As women, we can talk about our vacations, our designer bags, who we're dating, what we're doing, but we never have conversations around money.
The more you're anchored into understanding how your money works, you're able to build a long-term, sustainable, healthy business versus one that is just a chaotic, you're looking at your heartbeat on an EKG machine or something. I think that especially in the online world, there's so much of that toxicity that's been sold to us about, just manifest it and the money will come, and invest in things and it will show back to you. And it's just that could not be more of the worst ideas and horrible things that you can say to someone who is just trying to figure it out. My guest today, Cindy Kumar, is a fractional CFO who helps founders rebuild their financial foundations so they can grow with clarity, confidence, and sustainability. What makes Cindy's work so powerful isn't just the spreadsheets, it's her ability to navigate the intersection of financial health, emotional health, and entrepreneurial identity. In this conversation, we explore the truth about money wounds, the psychology behind financial decisions, and the cultural stories that shape how we spend or save, and the intimate connections between our emotional regulation and business growth. Because when we talk about financial health, we're really talking about how we see ourselves, how we show up for our communities, and how we make decisions that build not just businesses, but our lives. Cindy, it's so great to have you here on Reframing Perspectives. I think that talking to you as a fractional CFO, someone who is inside businesses and really sees what's happening in the insides of when people are blowing up and building money and making success, but then you look at what's really going on and how much of that is related to our belief systems, how much of that is related to this emotional connection. I feel as a CFO, you're kind of a therapist as well, because you're working on healing these money challenges that a lot of these entrepreneurs and founders have. So I can't wait to dive into all of this with you. So welcome to Reframing Perspectives.
Thanks so much, Payal, for having me today.
Yeah. I want to just before we dive into all of those conversations, I want to know, what was it about trying, working in this space and being a fractional CFO that was just calling your name and saying I want to help entrepreneurs. I want to help founders. I want to help them be successful in this way. This is my mission in life. I got to do this.
So I've been a CPA in Canada for about 12 years now. I've been in the finance industry. Started my business 3 years ago, just trying to educate more entrepreneurs on the tax side. But once I started having those kind of conversations around taxes, how to set up things, I realized there's also a gap with finances as well. A lot of people, they're making good money, the 50K, 100K months. But when you actually look at what's going on after they pay for all their expenses, there's nothing left over, nothing in profit, nothing in the bank account. It's a scramble to pay their taxes. And it's just everyone's just overspending, but not really looking at where that money is actually going.
Wow. Isn't it so interesting how so much of what we do see with entrepreneurship is about, and we hear these stories all the time about, you have to invest in order to go further. And I know I made this mistake early on in my entrepreneurship journey where I would make all this money and be oh my gosh, I made all this money. But because entrepreneurship is having, a business is like having your own baby, right? And it's the same way that someone would spend everything on their baby, but sacrifice things that they need for themselves. I find a lot of entrepreneurs like myself who've done that in the past, where we will take, let's say I get $20,000 in, I'm going to take that $20,000 and only take enough money that can pay my basic things. But really, I'm investing all of it right back into the business, because there's this belief system that we've been taught that you've got to, whatever you bring in, you got to invest it, and that's how you grow, that's how you build. But I find that that's such a naive way of looking at things.
That's so true. I feel it's being more intentional with how you're spending that money. So if you're jumping from coach to coach, but not really implementing anything, then you're pretty much just reinvesting in the wrong kind of areas. But it's taking a step back. I have this money. Do I eventually want to hire a team? What does the cost look like? Can I build up my emergency savings for 3 to 6 months so that when I do have a slow period, I'm not dipping into credit?
You mentioned that of jumping from coach to coach, but not actually implementing anything. And to me, that speaks to like a deeper emotional issue on where it's like you're hoarding information and you think that you're being productive because it's like, I'm hoarding this information, I'm learning. And so much of that comes back down to like perfectionism and comes back down to doubt that, the act of actually executing on making those decisions of whatever a coach has said or whatever you as a CFO has said, it's daunting and scary because it's asking you to go against the grain of like what you've always known. It's easier to just jump from coach to coach.
Yeah, so true. But I feel like for example, let's say you hire a sales coach. If you're just gonna listen to what they're saying, but never implement or like test it out and see what works for you, like you're never gonna know how to actually sell.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so curious, like what was the relationship that you had with money growing up, or what did you learn about it? Because so much of that really does shape the way then that because you have had to work through it or whatever you've had to understand. And obviously having been in the financial industry, you know what it means to have a relationship with money. But prior to that, prior to even getting into the industry, prior to getting, moving into that in college, what was your relationship with money? What did you see around you growing up?
That's such a great question. So growing up, my dad was like an entrepreneur in the real estate space. So it's like we would have money coming in all at once or periods there was nothing. But I remember even that during that slow period, he would keep like an envelope full of cash in one of the kitchen cupboards. And then just with him having so much reinvested in different properties and all this kind of stuff, during the 2008 recession, we pretty much just like lost everything. And then we had to like rebuild. But then that just taught me like if you have money, you need to spend it because it can be taken away from you. So when I started my corporate career as an accountant, it's like you get that paycheck every 2 weeks. And it's like I'd go out for happy hour, designer bags, clothes. It all just went on my credit card because I didn't know any better. And then every 2 weeks, I just paid it off.
Wow. Yeah. It's just, you're just spending and spending because it's the idea of that, oh, if I'm going to get it now, I might lose it. So might as well spend it.
Yeah, totally. And then I did the same thing in my business too. So like clients would pay me. And like you just mentioned, I'd feel the need to like reinvest it. And it wasn't until like the last year where I really started thinking about like growth and what I want my business to look like. I realized like I call it the teenage girl mindset, but I've been operating like her since I learned about money, just because with what happened growing up with my dad's business and the way cash flow came in, went out, I started doing the exact same thing. And I realized I was still being that girl. And I really just needed, like, I sat down and just like journaled and kind of like spiraled and just went through a rabbit hole. But I feel like just releasing all of that and understanding where it comes from and just realizing that like, just because that happened doesn't mean I have to continue thinking like that or operate my business, even my personal spending that same way.
That's so important. And to think about, we see our earliest role models around money and what happens. In 2008 obviously affected a lot of millennials, affected a lot of, us who are just kind of getting out of college and starting to build a career. And we see what happens. And there's a reaction of either I'm going to hoard all of this because I don't know what's going to happen, or it's I'm going to spend it all because I don't know what's going to happen, right? There's like these two responses that happen, or I see what my parents did and I'm going to do the complete opposite, even though our subconscious ends up following the same patterns. But I'm so curious, like, what are those emotional patterns that you find in founders specifically when they're making and driving those financial decisions?
I would say it's like fast and impulse. Like you see like a coach or someone you admire, like let's say, for example, now Black Friday, everyone's having sales and it's like you feel the need to swipe that credit card, sign up right away. But the reality is that coach is going to have the same sale next year in November. So it's all about, okay, if I do really want to work with this coach, what is it going to cost me? And then looking at your numbers and saying, does it actually make sense? Or can I understand, let's say, for example, it's $1,200. Can I put away $100 every single month? So next year in November, when I want to sign up for that program, I already have the money saved up.
Yeah, I think that's really great. What I'm really hearing is like there's such a fear and a scarcity that plays into the decision making and that leads people to making bad decisions. So how do you help them with that course correction?
I would say the first thing is like awareness. So like sitting down now and just understanding, what do you want next year to look like? What areas of your life are important to you? So if it's travel, similar to what I said about hiring the coach, doing the same thing. How much you want to spend on travel for the year? Or let's say a lot of women I work with, they want to plan for having kids, going on maternity leave and they obviously don't want to work during that time. So it's like, let's understand how much cash you need during that period and how much time are you going on mat leave. Let's build a plan for that, because a lot of times we feel like we can't take a vacation. If we get sick, we feel bad for not working, family emergency, someone passes away. Like those things are going to happen regardless of what's going on in your business. And if we're not working, the money's not coming in, and then people just panic.
Yeah, I hear that, but how, you're saying all the right things, right? But for a founder who still has that nervousness of taking action on the advice and on that support that you're giving and that awareness that you're talking about that's very real, how do you get them to actually take the action?
That's such a great question. I feel like it varies person to person, but I would say like even going through and asking them like, what was your relationship like with money growing up? What were your spending habits like then? What was like your family? What were the conversations like? Because once you understand and kind of unpeel those layers, it's like something clicks and it's just like an aha moment.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's got to be a lot of compassion in that space also for those founders, right? What do you see in terms of the type of shame that they're holding?
I would say the biggest thing is like feeling like you should have it all figured out around money. It's like we're not taught these things in school. Depending on how we grew up, like you don't have healthy relationships around money either. And it's just like we're passing that trauma generation to generation rather than just like openly talking about it. Like I feel like as women, we can talk about like our vacations, our designer bags, who we're dating, what we're doing, but we never have conversations around money, like, or running a business, what it's actually like.
Yeah, that is so true. I think that I see it a little bit more now where there are some women who are talking about it, but I also think that culture plays such a big role in this. And there's some cultures that there's a level of privacy, and it's as if you are encroaching on their privacy, and there's like secrecy. And I know like both of us being Indian, both of us being South Asian, that is a really big part of our culture. There's no one, if we're talking about or showing money, it's usually through status. It's not necessarily through, let's actually have a responsible conversation around what it is to run a business. What does it look like? What are you thinking about financially about the next phase of growth for you? Those pieces are hidden, and it's really, you're continuously just showing your success through your house, your car, your whatever materialistic status you can share.
That's so true.
Yeah. How do you see for founders that are solo founders versus partners, co-founders, and founders that are married? What do you notice? Like, is there a difference in the way that they come to work through their challenges around, organizing their finances and really understanding what it takes to run a business?
The man in the relationship is involved, they fully take over the finances. So even when I have conversations around taxes or like any like kind of financial planning, I feel like both of them will be on the call and then the man will be like leading the conversation or asking me questions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about, something that's interesting that you mentioned. So I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were 9-to-5ers. My brother's a 9-to-5er. I really took the risk on going out on myself and saying, I'm going to build a business and do it this way. So I don't necessarily have those role models. So there is that element of, and I didn't go to business school. I didn't do any of that. Like I was a film major in undergrad and I did psychology after that. And I'm curious though, you mentioned that your father was an entrepreneur. Do you notice a difference between founders that come from a generational understanding of business versus those that are starting off brand new?
I would say like the understanding of like the risk tolerance and like there's a lot of unknowns. I feel like that's like the biggest thing. Like my dad's always asking me like, when are you starting your business? I always thought I would climb like the corporate ladder. But even now, like with my brother, he's a lawyer. He just took over someone's practice. So he's in more of like a traditional kind of route. And I feel like me starting an accounting financial business online, it's like they didn't understand it. They were supportive. And I feel like we've had conversations on what it looks like because my dad always told me like, just like lease a space, hire a bookkeeper, like do the full kind of traditional kind of accounting.
The brick and mortar.
Israel, yeah. And then I was just like, no, I'm operating from home. Let me just figure it out. And then now he's like seeing everything like kind of fall in place. But it's just like, he was like very open-minded with like, because he knows like entrepreneurship, there's so much risk involved and there's so much unknown. Whereas I feel like if you come from like a comfortable 9 to 5 kind of home, it's just like, why are you letting that stability and like comfort go?
Yeah. How do you find that with the clients that you work with? Like, how do you find that affecting their decision making? How does the influence of their background, their family, that voice in their head of like, what are you doing? How do you find that affecting the way that they make decisions around what they're spending or what they're doing in their business?
That's such a great question. I feel like a lot of them start their businesses as a side hustle. And once they feel like they have a comfortable amount in the business, that's when they decide to go full time. But a lot of times they're having those kind of conversations. Like a lot of families will like loan out money to them, be involved in the business too, even though their parents aren't from an entrepreneurial background. I think it just comes down to like the relationship you have with your family, the communication style, and then just understanding, even if they don't get it, like it's totally okay. It's more about like trusting yourself rather than just doubting yourself with everything that you do, because you already have that energy. Then the energy you put out with like interacting with your clients, your marketing, like all of that's going to showcase with like your energy, how you're showing up. Like if you're already in that mindset that my business is going to fail, nobody wants me to succeed, like you're just putting that energy out there.
Yeah, it's so true. And sometimes it's really hard to shake because, that is what you grew up with. And entrepreneurship is such a roller coaster ride. The ups and downs, there's highs and lows. And it can be the first couple of years, it's really hard. And I feel like every day you're deciding, do I do this? I'm going to fail at this. Maybe I should look for a job, to like, I rock and this is amazing, And then I think over the years, you start to temper it a little bit and it starts to become, maybe it's showing up once a week and then once a month. And then, you kind of get there. But I don't think it necessarily ever goes away, that like up and down feeling of what it means to, because you're literally risking everything for making this work.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what are those ways that you have seen the transformation in your clients when they go from experiencing that financial chaos to their nervous system is relaxed? And how have you seen their businesses excel because they're starting to follow your advice?
I would say the biggest thing is like just sitting down and going through, like, let's say, for example, like the personal spending, like looking at everything line by line on how much you're spending per month and then building like a budget around that. Same with like the business finances. I feel like if you're not really looking at like your monthly bookkeeping or quarterly bookkeeping, maybe you're working with an accountant that does the tax side, work with a monthly bookkeeper, but you have no idea what the numbers actually mean. So sitting down with that fractional CFO, looking at like what's going on month to month. Maybe you have like a busy period and then a slow period, but if you never look at your numbers, you're never going to know that. Or maybe like your spending. So it all comes down to like just sitting down, understanding what's going on, and then building a plan and kind of reverse engineering that. So like I give my clients like 1 to 2 actions every single month to focus on. And if my client's like brand new to like financial literacy, it's more about like just doing little things like once a week, schedule a money date where you're just looking at what's coming in, what's going out, how much you're spending, kind of pre-planning for like the next week, the next month. I think it's just more of like the awareness piece. Like the more you avoid your finances and taxes, the worse it gets. And it's a lot of times it's not even as bad as you think, but it's more of just like sitting down and looking at where the money is going. Like I have clients where they sign up for subscriptions, like let's say Netflix, Amazon Prime, all these things, but they're not watching all of them on a daily basis. So it's like, why are you paying for them?
Yeah, there's that element of FOMO, right? That people have like, well, I'm waiting for that one season to drop on this show and on this platform, all of those things. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's just, again, to your point of awareness, and there really is this idea, like we haven't been taught about real financial literacy. We get taught math, but we don't get taught how to utilize in real life, and how that's going to affect us. And with entrepreneurship and being a business person, if you don't have a hold of your basic financial foundations, it can completely plummet your business.
So true.
Yeah, I just, I know for me, I remember, I think I shared it on your podcast episode about how I walked away from like, almost $500,000 because of a contract, because I just remembered how toxic that client could have been and how much it would have affected me and my team. And being a small business, I I was working on this proposal for like 8 months. And that meant that if I won this business, which I did win, and I still chose to walk away from it, it meant that because of being a small business, I wouldn't be able to take on necessarily as many other types of clients because of the resources and the bandwidth that's going to be tied up with this one particular client. But when I decided to walk away from it, that also meant that I lost 8 months of not having other prospects that I would continue to nurture in the same way that I would have done if this client didn't exist. And that was such a big lesson for me because it took me to a place of where it took me about 9 months to recover from that. I recognize that this is going to push me back in my business, and then I'm going to have to start over again. And so, what would you say that, and I know my lessons, but I'm just so curious from you, is that I think that is one of the most dangerous things. It's like we see these big numbers of, I'm going to bring in $400,000, $450,000 from this one client. But as a small, tiny business, if all of your business is reliant on one client, or on like maybe 2 or 3 clients, and then that client doesn't work out, or you decide not to work with them like I did, it can destroy everything. It can really create doubt. And I know that since then I've had moments where I'm scared. Like sometimes I'll be like, do I want to work with this client? Like, do I want to take on another project that could be that level? Like the number just gets really daunting because of that experience of I don't ever want to feel like my business is reliant on this one client doing something. What have you noticed in like the damages that can happen to a business because they put so much stock into focusing on one client to run the numbers of their business, and how that can really be scary?
It's super scary. I feel like it can like even bankrupt businesses because it's like you're so heavily invested on that. In that case, like I always say, like build up a contingency plan. Like worst case scenario, what happens if you lose that client? Or even during like your initial kind of discovery kind of process, I understand that's just as important for you to see if you actually want to work that person versus them trying to get you for your services. So a lot of times we're like, yes, someone wants a discovery call, you need to take them on, but not everyone you talk to is like a right fit for you. Or understanding like if you wanted to work with this client, how can you make it work so you can hire other employees, other contractors that can handle like the capacity of other clients too. So that way you're not just focusing on the one.
Yeah. See, these are things that I think there's such a misrepresentation for glamorizing entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And what people don't talk about. So I'm so glad that we are, because there is a lot of having to do projections and predictions. But those are projections and predictions are all like, you can go into hypotheticals of whatever, but then it's like, what are the behaviors that are actually going to align and match to get you those projections? Like, what does that look like?
That's such a great question. I feel like all your questions have been so good. Yeah, I always say, like, even for example, we've been talking about like some offers and things you want to do that you haven't launched yet. So it's really about just understanding like all of the possible costs, different pricing alternatives, kind of playing around with it. Even like hiring, I find is a good place with people wanting to grow and scale. A lot of times they end up hiring, they don't run the numbers, and then they end up not even making enough off that one employee, or there's never enough money to even make payroll. So even in those kind of situations, I would say like sit down with someone that has a financial background that can run those numbers for you. So understanding like the hourly rate, how many hours a person's going to work, what kind of ROI are you expecting from that employee, how are you going to track those things? Because those things are so important. If you're just paying someone for the sake of doing the job, but you don't see the return on it, then it's just like you're just digging yourself a hole. But you don't know that unless you're actually running the numbers.
Hi friends, I have a favor to ask you. If you're enjoying these episodes, then I'd really love it if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with your friends and family. Your words help others discover that the stories and these episodes exist in the perspectives that we're exploring over here. And the more that we can grow, the more feedback that we get from you through those reviews, the more we can make sure that we're creating meaningful episodes that you want to listen to. You have no idea how much this helps and how much I appreciate you for doing this. So if you don't mind, whether it's following us, subscribing, hitting the button below, if you can leave a review for us, or if you just share this with your friends and family, the episodes that you think that they would really resonate with, it means more to us than you can imagine. Thank you so much. what I'm so curious about though is that when you're thinking about those projections or you're thinking about the behaviors along with it of like when you're looking at those numbers and before you make an investment in anything, do you give a idea of you should be, for example, a quarter ahead? So for example, like, as Q1 of 2026 starts and you're thinking about Q2 and what type of investments you want to make, would it be the right decision to say that before I say yes to any new investments, do I already have Q2 booked out? Do I already have things in Q2 that are lined up so that I know that even if I invest in this, I have a flow coming through versus that I think that like, especially in the online world, there's so much of that toxicity that's been sold to us about, just manifest it and the money will come and invest in things and it will show back to you. And it's just like, that could not be more of the worst ideas and like horrible things that you can say to someone who is just trying to figure it out.
So true. Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is like understanding what kind of expenses you have coming up for Q2, because regardless of how much money you're going to make, you still have like your business expenses, you have your personal expenses as well. So making sure you have enough to cover those. And then I would say it makes sense to like invest.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's when a founder is making those decisions though, and is thinking about it, is it important for a founder, an entrepreneur who's just getting started to work with a financial advisor from day one? Or is this something that you recommend that, all right, go through their first year of business and then let's connect? I know obviously you work with founders that are making 500K and up, but what about someone who is literally in year one of their business and they want to make sure they're like, I'm not going to make mistakes. I want to get it right from day one.
Yeah, I would say talk to like a lawyer, an accountant, a fractional CFO, someone that can actually guide you in the right way. I find so many times even like how you structure your business from a legal perspective, that plays a huge role in like all the bills, expenses you're going to have coming up as well. I would say like at the beginning of your business, that's a great time. Or even before like you decide to leave your full-time job and go into it, just talk to someone and understand like what your responsibilities are. Because a lot of times people don't even know their tax deadlines or how they structure it is going to impact their tax bill or like their legal bill, or they don't understand like how to even price their offers and they're just going based on what other people are charging. But it's like you need to understand how much you want to pay yourself, what your profit margins are, and build that into your prices too.
Yeah, there's so much conversation always about when it comes down to pricing. I feel like it's been so vague for most people. And usually the advice that's given is price based off of your value. And although there is truth to that, and there's truth to what it took you 8 hours to do before and now it takes you 3 hours, means that your price goes up because you're adding more value and you're able to, and how much that you're able to contribute to someone's success and their trajectory. But what you're talking about is so much more than that. It's not just about a random number out of the sky that you're like, I value myself at $30,000 and that's what I'm going to say. And it's really looking at like, well, where did that number really come from?
Yeah, it's like reverse engineering it, like how much time, how many resources, what you want like your monthly or yearly like profit to be, and then also understanding how much you want to pay yourself. So I help like founders build that into their pricing. So regardless of like how much they sell, they still have that percentage of profit coming from that and paying themselves. Or if they have debt, let's incorporate a plan into your pricing. So based on how much you sell, you can put a percentage directly towards your debt.
That's really helpful because again, it's just this idea of when you sit with your numbers, you're actually going to know what is possible. I know so many businesses and entrepreneurs that want to build a business that they can scale. They want to build a business that, is one to many, and so that they can scale the business. But they realize that the life that they actually want is a little bit of a slower pace. The life that they actually want, they don't want to do so much. And so now what their ideal number is versus their life design versus what their business model is are completely incongruent with each other. And then they're miserable. What do you see with your clients is that something that you talk to them about? Is that something that you ask them about? Is like, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want your vision, not just for your business, but like how hard do you want to work? Do you want to be, a more on a slow paced path of growth? Like, are you comfortable with that? Or is that a conversation that you're having?
Yeah, I would say definitely, especially when we like price their offers too, because they'll be like, I want to price at like $500, for example, but their goal is like $1 million at the end of the year. It's like, do you know how many $500 packages you have to sell to get to that $1 million? And I feel like those conversations are very eye-opening because the online space, it's like, just manifest, it's going to happen. But it's like, when you actually rework those numbers, it's like, no, that $500 package, you're going to have to sell so much of it to get to that $1 million. So I feel like those kind of conversations are very eye-opening for people. And it's just like, let's be realistic. Like if 300K or like 500K is your goal, let's kind of reverse engineer it. Can we increase your prices so you don't have to sell that much? Or let's say you find like an employee or contractor that can support you so you can hit those numbers. But it's like being realistic about it.
I find though that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that, again, going back to the whole money mindset piece, they really struggle with integrity of raising prices. They find that even though they want to make that $1 million, they still want to support the demographic that doesn't have the cash flow that they, to raise it to, let's say, going from charging something for like $1,000 to charging to $5,000. And there's a demographic, then they feel they're almost abandoning the demographic because they're raising their prices. And are they becoming one of those entrepreneurs that is now abandoning it and continuing to, and is not living in integrity? How do you help those founders balance their deep value of wanting to make sure that they support communities that don't always have access to the type of work and products that, they want to support versus being able to also ideally get to their dream vision number?
That's a great question. I actually just went through this myself. So for the last 2.5 years, I've helped like a lot of startups, and like I didn't price as high as I should have, but it was more of like just supporting people, trying to help them. And then it just became me draining my energy, trying to handhold. I was more concerned about deadlines than the clients were. And I just realized like I can't keep going on like this. Like I started having health issues like I did in corporate. And it just comes down to like understanding like what's important to you. Like I'm really big on like financial education, tax education. And it's just more of understanding like the people that are going to take you seriously about that. They're in like a higher kind of revenue range. Maybe even like your client avatar doesn't apply to you anymore. Maybe it's like totally different, but it's just understanding like the big picture of what's important to you, and just understanding like you do have your social media content. Maybe you have old courses. So if there are beginners, you can just like send them to those kind of programs. You can give them away for free or just maybe like a low kind of offer, but just understanding like the people that value what you're going to do and say, it's okay to like change, because like maybe you started your business a certain way, but as you're evolving and growing, so does like your clientele.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotional relationships in there that you're having to navigate, right? The complexity of your own identity shifting, and how your identity shifting means that your clients are going to shift because that former version of you doesn't exist anymore. And that plays into this work as well. And what I'm hearing you really talk about is when someone is in startup mode, when someone's just getting started, they more than likely have a lot of those money relationships challenges that can prevent them from taking the steps that you need to do with them for your business to be a success and also for them to be a success. And so being able to offer them something where it's like, hey, here's my book. Get started here first. As you work through those things, then I'll be there for you, and it's giving that like ability where it's like, I'm not abandoning you. I'm not leaving you, but I'm just like shifting how I'm supporting you.
So true. And I feel like sometimes even giving them a referral to someone else that can support them, that goes a long way too. So they don't feel like they're from scratch trying to find someone new.
I love that because Cindy, what you're talking about is that, again, there's space and access for everybody in the spectrum of, there's CFOs that are probably charging like 10 times what you're charging right now, and it's like one day maybe you're going to get there as well. But it's like knowing that idea that I'm not the only advisor out there, and there are plenty of people that can meet you with where you're at. Like there are people who are very content with saying, I only want to work with this demographic and I'm okay making X amount. I don't want to build an empire. Like I just want to help. I want to do this good work and I have a good life myself. And so for that person, it's like they may be able to find that alignment while someone else is like, I'm ready for that next challenge for myself and ready for the next challenge. It's like finding those people and building a referral network is like a beautiful way to making sure that you're giving to those people without it necessarily even being yourself.
So true.
Yeah, I love that. Cindy, like, I'm just so curious, like we've talked a lot about, relationship with money, founder relationship with money, all of the challenges that come out, like how you kind of navigate those things. But one of the things that I'm curious about is when a founder, when an entrepreneur is navigating their relationship with money and they're navigating their relationship with when they're healing that relationship with money and they're healing their business, how does that ripple into their personal relationships? How does that ripple into their life beyond business?
I would say like it goes so much further. Like I've had people that have done like the healing work around money and then they start having conversations with like their parents about it. Like growing up, like this happened and this has impacted me in this way. Also with the women that I work with, some of them have kids. So it's like the conversations they're having with their kids now about like money, healthy relationship, instead of being like money doesn't grow on trees, hard work, you get money because of that. It's just like, no, having these open kind of conversations and realizing like even letting your parents know like they were just trying their best too. They didn't know any better. So it's like just having that open dialogue goes a long way.
Yeah, it's a lot of compassion in there for just like the stories that we're building, rebuilding, and shifting. Cindy, I have one final question for you. If you could reframe one belief entrepreneurs have about money, what would that be?
I would say money doesn't grow on trees because I feel like money is just like energy. It's a resource. It's a tool. And there's like an abundance of it. Like I think of money as like nature. Like if you're walking by the ocean, you don't see like one drop of water. It's like water is just like flowing. You look at trees. There's so many of them. Like I feel like nature in general is so abundant. And I feel like money, we think of it like scarcity.
Yeah, absolutely. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on to Reframing Perspectives and sharing this. I think, again, I relate to it so much as being an entrepreneur and having to have navigated all of these like different conversations, relationship, my decision making and how it's affected my business, how there's been moments where like I don't feel like I'm further enough in my business as I should have been, but also at the same time, like now with a healthier relationship with money and how I'm navigating my decisions in business, I actually feel very content with the pace I'm moving at because there isn't this comparison that's happening to others. It's really about looking at how far I've come from where I was and knowing that the focus is on the longer term vision that I have. And I think one of the things that said so beautifully in this conversation is about just really the more you're anchored into understanding how your money works, you're able to build a long-term, sustainable, healthy business versus one that is just like a chaotic, like, you know, you're looking at your heartbeat on an EKG machine or something. So it's just what you're really sharing is just about, I don't know, what I'm taking away from it really is just about patience and having kindness and compassion towards that. It's not about overnight success. It's about like strong, like the same way you build a strong foundation for your house, you build strong foundation of your money habits so that you can build a successful business over time.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's just looking for like the quick way to get rich.
Yeah. Right. And I think honestly, online has sadly created that narrative that it's possible with people talking about that I made 100K months every month but they're not showing the reality behind their business of what they're doing.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I think this conversation is so pivotal. Cindy, like where can everyone find you to build their money habits and build their relationship, especially as an entrepreneur and founder?
You can connect with me on Instagram at It's Cindy Kumar. I also have a podcast called Our Profit Era. And I'd also love to offer like your audience a 20-minute free profit strategy call where we can talk more about like what's going on in their business and how I could possibly support them.
Wonderful. We'll definitely make sure to have that link in our description and everything so they can connect with you. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of your like knowledge, expertise in this space. I know that I've benefited from watching everything that you share and how much you just call it out. I love how you just really are a straight shooter. You're really direct, but with a lot of compassion, but you're very direct about calling out what it really takes to be a healthy entrepreneur.
Thank you so much, Payal, for having the conversation. I feel like we need more conversations around money like this.
Absolutely. I know this won't be the last. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.